tell Rachel, I don't know, Michelle that we're recording. If they have a problem with it, shut out.
You said we started at 12:15?
Yeah,
You better really get a drink.
yeah.
You don't have to know what the closest machine
The cafeteria in the building next door. We don't, yeah, they took all of the other machines out.
All right, well, I'll be back in 20 minutes. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
16th floor over there.
No, I'll just park here. So, I guess we're not eating.
I think it's sort of like my own thing.
I'm not eating if no one else is eating, that's awkward. If I just tuck myself here and no one will notice me. On that emergency guardianship today, they filed for guardian of the estate, like this morning. And I was like, hey Judge, you want to hear that guardian of the person? That's what I was running around trying to figure out, like, he's like, you're gonna need a little more lead time, and we only have 30 minutes, because we have 2 of them.
Your codes if you want. Okay, great.
The microphone is on here.
Okay.
She is recording.
Okay.
Unless you're not talking.
As long as I don't have to watch the recording back of myself talking, I'm real cool with it.
Alright, I need you to make sure that your Supreme Court is your Supreme Court
Yes.
I'll give you guys the handouts.
And, okay, so Wi-Fi is the,
AT&T. It just says AT&T.
and there's no,
An evaluation.
it's back in the hall. So we'll pass it right over here.
I saw her, yeah.
Just making sure.
You know, Lenny. Kind of migraines since Friday.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Michelle, if I just, the words don't come out, just start talking.
Have you had to do this program before?
Michelle has.
Okay.
Oh. Thanks for printing up the
Oh, yeah.
things.
Anything else?
Okay, so there's, hopefully I have, is this what I put in?
I'm not sure, but here's
Oh.
something.
Oh, okay, that's something to do. That looks, so hopefully I have a,
You didn't teach me about the,
okay. This looks like it might be a thing, or not. Wait, yes, it is. Hi.
Thank you.
And
Oh,
screen,
there
like,
should be a
Oh, it
remote
just-
on the side there.
okay. All right.
Those can turn it on.
Okay.
Oh.
Sounds like it's warming up. Oh, okay.
All of a sudden, I was like, oh,
Will you just double check that your number is right?
Oops.
And then
yes.
just Rick's name on here.
Oh. How many are registered? Okay.
We kept it at 15. So not too many people in there.
Okay.
You to double check your card number also.
I just did the
Check.
end.
Yep.
It'd be nice if we could like dim that down a little bit, but I don't think it's a adjustable thing.
Oh, that makes it really hard.
All right, it's fine.
It's very bad. We do make a little lamp.
It's cute. Good idea.
Spill it on my.
All right.
And on work mode.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
They went to the library story hour yesterday. And I ran into
So
one of the
cute.
moms in my group who's also, well, was one of the girls with her grandma too. So,
Aw.
look, Mom, you can make a grandma friend. And Frank's got a bright yellow shirt on, so it's been really easy to find him on the camera all day.
Oh, well, that's nice. You should dress him brightly more.
That's what I'm saying. I was trying to look for him in the nap puddle and make sure he's sleeping. 'Cause he's knocked and knocked.
There's a couple more people that haven't come in, so I'm waiting for them.
Yeah, we'll wait. Couple minutes. I mean, it's not like they can't catch up.
Yeah.
It's not a highly complex topic, really.
No.
Well, I want to get started and then they might sneak in.
That's fine.
There is a handout and an evaluation form,
Okay.
but if they don't do it, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
Couple things before I hand the program over. There is another one happening on May 10th, another brown bag lunch that's for stealing records and expungement. If you want to sign up on your way out, or you can call us some way.
Same time, 12:15?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, on May 10th. And there was one other thing, and I'm not going to remember it. So maybe I'll catch you at the end of the class. This is Rachel Dilley and Michelle Grapp. They are from the Supreme Court Law Library, and I'm handing it over to you guys.
All right. Thanks, Minnie. So, just a little bit about what we do at the Supreme Court Library, which is much the same as what they do here. We tend to focus more on helping court staff, not just Supreme Court staff, but court staff across the state find their legal resources. Sometimes we're asked to do fun things like 50 state surveys and work on task force research and things like that. But we also assist attorneys from Ohio and across the country, really. We get questions from other states frequently, and we help the general public. And that's where this topic comes in because, of course, similar to here, and I worked here as a clerk when I was in library school. I worked here for, 6 or 7 months as I was making my way through grad school. But I had no idea what, really even pro se litigants were, and I got a quick introduction while I was working here. So really when I started working at the Supreme Court Law Library, sovereign citizens became forefront in my mind because it can take a lot of time. Hi, come on in. It can take a lot of time and effort and patience to deal with. So that's our story, and I wondered if we might, just so we know the types of jobs that you're doing, if you wouldn't mind going around and saying your name and where you work and in what capacity, just so that we know. I'll start here.
Heather Sunday, and I'm one of the staff attorneys for the Franklin County Probate Court.
Okay, great.
Krista Pearson, Defense Counsel, Private Practice.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Adam Todd. I'm in private practice as well.
Okay.
Joel Moore, I just opened my own practice.
All right.
Greg Warner, I'm also with the Probate Court.
Okay.
Tim Pierce, I head of the appeals unit of Franklin County Public Defender. I've appeared in front of you in court a couple times.
I'm Jay Spotswood. I'm staff attorney to Judge Andy Miller here at the Franklin County
Okay,
Court of
great.
Functions.
Rebecca Hess, Court of Deputy Bankruptcy Court. I just need the COE.
Yeah, we kind of figured that might be the case with a lot of you. So at least it is an interesting topic. So even if it doesn't help you necessarily in your day-to-day.
It helps me.
Yeah, for court employees, yes.
Probate, yeah, I can see that.
Yes, but yeah, if you're in private practice, you probably don't encounter sovereign citizens all that much, but it is still interesting.
Maybe on the other side, who knows?
All right.
All right. So what we're going to talk about today is how to identify a sovereign citizen. Obviously, sovereign citizens don't always, come up to you and tell you like, "Hey, I'm a sovereign citizen." So we're going to go over some keywords that might clue you in, resources they might be asking for, things they might be filing that might kind of hint at you that maybe they don't hold typical legal beliefs. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle these legal requests, since many of them are based on misinformation or legal doctrines that are all of their own. And then finally, just some tips on how to best serve the requester while maintaining appropriate resources for other important work. Rachel kind of alluded that sometimes sovereign citizens can take up a lot of your time and a lot of the resources in your office, just by the nature of what they're filing and sort of how they're filing.
So what is a sovereign citizen? Basically, sovereign citizen is a catch-all phrase. It applies to any person who holds a belief, whether they belong to an organized sovereign citizens group or they're just kind of a lone wolf, just reading too much misinformation on the internet or watching too many YouTube videos. But the commonality between all these different disparate groups of people is that they don't believe in the legitimacy of the U.S. government, state governments, local governments. They often come up with just legal systems of their own and try to live life using their own system of law enforcement and elections and the whole 9 yards. So there are a number of different organizations, and there is a bibliography on the back page of your handout. So if you're interested in learning more, you can learn all the names of the different organizations. But and again, you don't have to be part of an organization to be a sovereign citizen. Most sovereign citizens are pro se because they don't trust the legal system, so why would they go and get an attorney that has sworn to an oath to the legal system they don't believe in? Although sometimes when they're in criminal court, for reasons we'll talk about later, sometimes they will accept the help of a public defender-ish, kind of. They'll accept the public defender but then reject the help that the public defender tries to give them. How many of them are out there? It's hard to know because there are so many just different groups. They try to fly under the radar. I read an article that said an estimate is 300,000 to 400,000. And yes, they are here in Ohio. They're here in Columbus. They email our library with regularity. So.
And because there's no sort of cohesive, one sovereign citizen group, their beliefs aren't necessarily cohesive either. They all believe that the government's been overthrown. But some groups believe it was like during the Civil War. Some people believe it was in 1933 when we moved away from the gold standard. So just like there are different groups, there's kind of different belief systems as well. One of the big things is at birth, they feel like the government, or they think that the government creates a corporate identity. This is the straw man identity. So there is like the flesh and blood baby, and then there is like the baby that is this corporate shell. And this is evidenced by, if you look at birth certificates in all caps, right? They ascribe a lot of importance to punctuation and like the way things are capitalized or italicized in documents. And so because, this birth certificate has all caps, this is a straw identity, and the government's, set up an account in the U.S. Treasury, and they're borrowing against the future labor of this child. And it sounds ridiculous as I'm saying it. Everyone's kind of looking at me. But this is what they believe, and they believe really strongly in these beliefs. How they've come to them, is a whole other thing. So they believe that they can separate themselves from this corporate shell. This is called redemption, and so this comes in with, they file a lot of like paperwork. One of like the kind of sovereign scams out there is they sell like these paperwork bundles to people wanting to emancipate themselves from this corporate shell. So people kind of get taken in by this. So they think you can redeem yourself from this and declare yourself sovereign, and then nothing, you know, the laws don't apply to you. You don't need a license to travel. You don't have to pay taxes.
And there's they differentiate between the sovereign self
Yes.
and the federal
Yes,
self.
there's two types of citizens that were created somehow by the 14th Amendment in their mind. There's the sovereign citizens, which is what they are because they don't accept or have any sort of relationship with the federal government. And then there are the federal citizens, which are, you know, the people who pay taxes and have social security numbers.
Enslaved, basically,
Yes,
by the government.
Yes. So that's kind of their belief system in a nutshell. Again, this is a topic you could go down the rabbit hole in because every kind of group has their own little, you know, they've got like, this is like the general belief system, but they've all got their other things that they believe and are convinced are true.
Yep. So we're gonna, just as if you didn't realize already how possibly bizarre this all is, we're gonna look at a couple websites so that you can really see. Okay. Okay, so this is a website of an organized group of sovereign citizens. That you can see that they've reorganized the United States into regions or territories, and each of them has its own leadership. They have elections, they have conference calls where the leadership will call in and they'll discuss legal topics.
They have their own like legal person that helps the other sovereigns in that area with their issues.
That's a big thing, it seems, with the sovereign organizations, is that they have dedicated legal specialists who will just ask law libraries or go to law libraries and copy just volumes and volumes of material and then post them on the website. So and you'll look at some of the names here, like organic hierarchies, organic polling and elections.
You'll notice the things at the top are in quotation marks because, again, punctuation is
Right, punctuation is
very
important.
important to them.
So, hi, come on in. No problem.
Thank you.
So they'll post all these things that they acquire from law libraries or other websites, really, and just they'll post them on the website for all their other
Group members to-
comrades
Yeah.
to see. So let's see.
Because surprise, surprise, they don't have a high regard for copyright law.
But yeah, it's just layers deep. They've got kind of a abbreviated Black's Law Dictionary in here. It just goes on and on and on.
It's a good domain name.
Right? And that's one of the things that struck me about this one too, because I was like, oh, like it, you know, .us, kind of legitimate sounding.
Yeah.
In there.
Yeah.
Right. And this one is, another website from, as best we can tell, the guy who developed this website has passed away, but there was so much important information on here that people have kept it going, even though he passed away in 2009, I believe. I think this guy is he was more of a lone wolf. But still, if you're searching on the internet, you come across this and maybe you haven't been taught information literacy, you might buy into this, some of this stuff. Educate yourself. Let's see, he's got a lot of different stuff on here. Apparently he was a recovering alcoholic, so he has stuff about AA in here, but then, the missing original 13th Amendment. Maybe that's what we were talking about. Anyway, I don't want to, give them too much time, but I just wanted to show you.
Yeah.
Okay. And next.
So, like I said, sovereigns don't usually identify themselves. They're not going to normally, or sometimes they do. I mean, it's hard to say. I've had many reference interactions, though, where I've been talking to somebody on the phone. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be your run-of-the-mill legal question. And I'll start making notes. And then they start saying things. Or I hear terms, and I go, oh, okay. So it's going to be one of those questions. We've already talked about straw man, redemption. There's a lot of corporation or incorporation, corporation of the state. That's a fun one that they like to use a lot. Oath of office. They really like the oaths of offices for judges. I don't think I've ever had a non-sovereign ask me that question before. And admiralty law is a big thing. And the thing is, de facto government, traveling in a private capacity, that one's always a dead giveaway too. Common law, but they don't mean common law in the way that most people mean common law. And that's one of the other things is that, a lot of the words and like legal terms that they use, they sound proper. But in the context of the way sovereigns use them, they're meaningless. They use a lot of legal sounding words, but not in the way that like an attorney would use them or anybody who has, sort of a legal background would. But again, that's sort of how sometimes they draw people in too, like maybe people who aren't, as up to date on evaluating information or don't have experience with the legal system. They see these legal terms and they think, oh, okay, like this person knows what they're talking about, and then they kind of, get sucked into it. So, there's a whole list of, in one of the articles, there's a whole list of a bunch of different terms. And so those are just some of them. But if you're talking to somebody and they start dropping in those terms, that is an indication that perhaps maybe they ascribe to, a sovereign citizen belief system. Yeah.
We had a case many years ago, actually, it turned out favorably for the client. It was an excellent Fourth Amendment case, an illegal search of a home, but she tried to fire a public defender because, for many of the reasons I think you all are talking about, she refused to submit to the court's jurisdiction prior to the hearing.
Yes.
Because she saw there was a fringe
Yes.
on the flag, and that was an admiralty court.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the judge, who's since passed away, said, yeah, I'm going to overrule that. And proceeded to have the hearing, and she won.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I mean, yes.
yeah, which of course had nothing to do with her sovereign citizen status, but everything to do with the Fourth Amendment.
Yes,
Yeah.
the fringed flag is a big one. That
Yeah.
one, I've gotten questions about that. I've seen that one come up in the literature time and again. Because, if they're in an admiralty court, they don't have jurisdiction over them, and
That's right.
which,
Yeah.
is true, but does the flag really, so, yeah.
So what does the sovereign citizen research? They tend to like older resources. Have you gotten requests for Blackstone's commentaries that you have? I don't
Yeah.
think I have personally, but just because there's a big thing, there was an amendment to the Constitution that never was. It was the if you get, oh gosh, now I'm gonna. Oh, the Titles of Nobility Amendment.
Oh.
So at one point, the government was, early on, before the War of 1812, they were talking about this possible amendment that citizens of the United States should not be allowed to get a title of nobility. It, of course, as we know, never came to pass, but there was an error in a secondary resource that included that because they weren't quite sure if it passed or not, and sovereign citizens have kind of globbed onto that, and yeah, they research that kind of thing. So older resources they love. Also, the 14th Amendment, they think that everything went wrong after the 14th Amendment as far as citizenship, and Bouvier's Law Dictionary tends to be a favorite. Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, which I think is you all would know better than me. It's a choice of law, federal diversity jurisdiction case. The Uniform Commercial Code is also a big one. In preparation for this, I kind of just plugged in a search into Westlaw to see how many recent cases contain the words sovereign citizen. And just last month, the Ohio Supreme Court had this case, Furr versus Ruhlman. Very short case, as you might imagine, but so this guy they didn't talk about what his underlying criminal charges were, but he was convicted of some kind of criminal charge, but then he filed a mandamus because, and I'll just quote here from the case. In that proceeding, under the lower court proceeding, he filed a motion to dismiss the case against him based on 1, his reservation of rights under the Uniform Commercial Code 1-308, and 2, an argument that the proceedings against him violated 18 U.S.C. 241, and because they deprived him of his UCC rights. These arguments are characteristic of a sovereign citizen defense. By invoking UCC 1-308, so-called sovereign citizens contend that they preserve their common law rights and exempt themselves from federal and state law. So I was just last month. They think that if they don't enter into a contract with the government, that they're using that UCC to try to exempt themselves from any kind of agreement that they make themselves. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
Exam.
That they make themselves available. I don't know. So I've got a headache. Words are escaping me.
Quick question,
Yeah.
so I understand,
Yeah.
'cause I've had that before.
Yeah.
They will sign court pleadings, signature,
UCC, mhm.
24, I don't know.
Whatever it is, yeah.
So the belief is that they're reserving certain rights under common law?
Under the UCC, that they don't.
They're not entering into
that-
some sort of contract. of
Remember
any
that
sort.
straw man thing where they think that when a
Oh.
child is born, there's a shell corporation that's created, and the Treasury, and it's tied with your Social Security number, and the Treasury puts aside so much money that they think if I'm not agreeing to that contract between myself and the government, that the contract is void and therefore I'm not subject to your laws. That's, if you can make, I know it's
doesn't make a lot of
confusing, it
sense.
doesn't make sense to us, but we're
Yeah.
trying our best to convey.
Yeah, there are a lot of, yeah.
We've already talked about the Admiralty law with the French flags, and liens is a big topic of research, and that'll come up here in just a bit.
And so what do they file? Well, they're prolific filers, which is ironic considering they don't, believe in the court or the court system. They file a lot. Most of their files are relief from criminal charges, demands for money. They file things to intimidate and harass people, a lot of times clerks, other people in the government. Things that Angela was talking about just the other day. They had somebody come in who was requesting a bunch of different types of forms that they wanted to file, and they were forms that did not exist. It was things they hadn't heard of, because a lot of what they're filing is nonsensical and doesn't make any sense. Sometimes their goal is just to clog up the court system with their filings, and for some reason they are obsessed with filing things on legal-sized paper. That was mentioned in several resources, but they did not go into why that was a thing. And so I am just going to count that as one of their other quirks. But, yeah. My favorite thing, though, which is not something that they file, but something I read about that a lot of times they will get debts and they will send back a chargeback notice. And essentially, they send back a chargeback notice saying, well, the government will be covering that from my secret treasury account, so I'm not going to pay that debt, because don't worry, the U.S. government and my secret strawman account, they'll just take care of that. And that's not something they obviously file in court, but I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. If you deal with the public in any way, shape, or form, this, this graphic may make a lot of sense to you. So, and this comes from a librarian background, a law library background.
Yeah, I think two librarians came up
yeah.
with this and presented it at a conference, and
Yeah.
we really like it.
We
And
do like this
felt
because
it was very suitable for not just sovereign citizen requests, but sometimes a lot of the requests we get at the library.
yes, I mean, a lot of pro se's or litigants would be on here, but, you know, pro se's are they're just trying to save a buck and not hire an attorney, and they have legitimate, you know, legal research needs, and maybe they're misguided or uninformed, but a lot of times the unusual belief is in this pyramid, or not all there. It's debatable. Is where the sovereign citizens fall on this chart, and here's some examples. This is a couple of these that we've actually gotten at the law library. So this first one, can you send me information or other sources as to when words are in brackets? Like, what legal significance does that have, and what legal significance does it have if a word is in italics in legal documents or in a constitution? So they're trying to ascribe some meaning to punctuation and style that maybe necessarily isn't a thing.
No, and
so
I got this question from somebody, and of course, you know, American jurisprudence, corpus juris, they don't talk about the legal significance of brackets or italicizing things. That's not what those resources are for. Brackets just mean you're pulling like the middle of a sentence into a quote, and you're capitalizing the first letter for punctuation, for grammar reasons, not for, you know, any special meaning. And so I just, you know, and italics, you know, a lot of times legal, like things that are in Latin, a term, you know, are in italics in documents. And so, you know, I very kindly wrote back to this person, and I just said, you know, oh, unfortunately these things don't come up in corpus juris or American jurisprudence. You know, you might find this information about, like, it was a grammar website, helpful. And I just left it at that. Because there is no special meaning or legal significance to brackets. It's just telling you that this wouldn't normally be capitalized. And so on the pyramid there, that's kind of, you know, an unusual belief, maybe sane but a little misguided on thinking that means something.
Yeah.
The second one was
go
also
ahead.
the one that
Yeah.
it was somebody had called, and I saw this video on YouTube, and they talked about this secret account that, you know, that I can tap into. I want to know how to do that. And you could tell, like, they were fact checking, right? Like, so maybe they hadn't fallen down, you know, this rabbit hole of sovereign citizens. They'd clearly seen some video of somebody talking about that. So they kind of fell more in that sane but misguided thing. And actually, if you go on the U.S. Treasury website, they actually have a whole page devoted to talking about these accounts and how they don't exist. And so I just kind of sent him a link to that, saying, like, oh, I couldn't find any information about it. Like, you know, here's the U.S. Treasury website. You know, you might be able to find some helpful information there. And we'll talk a little bit later about, you know, I didn't tell him he was wrong. I didn't try to argue with him his belief. I just was like, here's a resource that talks about this thing. And I just kind of left it at that.
This last one is, I just extracted this from another case that came out this year from the 2nd District Court of Appeals, State v. Hulsman. Okay, so this was a case where the defendant was, he was driving, he was found guilty of driving under suspension or cited. And again, I'll just quote directly. Hulsman filed an answer stating that, I choose not to contract with you. This was written on a copy of the traffic ticket and bore the following notarized signature, UCC 1-207 Edward B. Hulsman, just like you were talking about. And then later on, it says, on appeal, Hulsman appears to raise his rights as a sovereign citizen, while not using that term specifically, by referring to himself as a state American national man of flesh, and claiming, quote, it has been established by the United States Supreme Court, licensing and registration of private American state national Ohio, and has never been required, and the courts and state practices of enforcement is a violation of the organic United States of America and rights of the people. So there's that organic word that we saw on that website. So again, this was just, this was the a March 3rd, 2023 decision. So, it's happening frequently.
So if you look at that period, that one's maybe falls at the very top of not all there.
Maybe not all there.
So sovereign citizens and the legal system, one of the things, is a lot of times they are deemed paper terrorists, and we kind of alluded to that with the liens. And so one of their favorite tactics is to file liens against people, judges, attorneys, clerk of courts, people they feel like have wronged them, because filing liens is easy to do. Bogus liens, they can file them, but they're very, very hard to remove. And you might not even know a lien has been filed against you until you go to do a real estate transaction or run a title search or something. And so this has proved to be a huge problem, so much so that some states have put laws in place to combat this, allowing clerks to reject claims that they reasonably believe to be fictitious. And besides liens, like I said, they file a lot of material to clog up the courts, fatigue the individuals that they are filing against. They also tend to be disruptive in court. I don't know if anyone's been kind of following the Darrell Brooks trial up in Wisconsin. He was the man who drove into a Christmas parade. He is a self-proclaimed sovereign citizen. Had to be removed from court a bunch of times for lots of outbursts, which is kind of, not all sovereign citizens, but a lot of the ones who make it up to the court and stuff tend to be pretty disruptive. They normally do not take on the help of a public defender. They usually like to defend themselves because they kind of use their own legal language. It takes a really long time sometimes to get through their cases. And so they end up taking a much larger amount of time for the court to finish their cases, kind of sucking up court resources, which, we all know the courts are really busy, so it's kind of unfortunate.
Excuse me, do any of sovereign citizens get declared to be vexatious litigators?
I would imagine that they do,
Yeah.
just based on the people who ask questions at our library and what I know of the vexatious litigator list, I would say definitely. But not as often, I don't know how often that happens, how often those things overlap, but I would imagine they must, especially when they get really vindictive and, start doing something like this. So this case, I was living in Chicago at the time that this one happened. So this was a woman who kind of believed in some of these, held these sovereign beliefs. Her brother was in trouble for drug charges, and she got kicked out of the courthouse for being really disruptive. And so what she ended up doing in retaliation is she ended up filing billions of dollars of bogus liens against people involved, against the prosecuting attorney, against a bunch of other people. One of the, the clerk of courts didn't, it was 2 years later that they were attempting a real estate transaction, and they found out they had this $1 billion lien against them that this woman had filed. Which, like I said, you can get rid of fraudulent liens, but it does take your time up, and it, can be expensive and stuff too. And so she, filing a fraudulent lien is illegal. So she ended up going to prison. The judge gave her
6 months. 6 months more.
6 months more than you would normally give it because of just the
egregiousness. Yeah.
Yes, and what she did, they had to move the case into a different county because of all the people she had filed against. But it at the very end, she insisted on representing herself until the very end when they were getting ready to give her charges, and then she's
sentence,
I would like help from a public defender now.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to, they like to defend themselves maybe right up until the point where they've, sort of gotten in real trouble there. And that speaks to a point too, we have, sovereign citizens who come to our library, and in order to get to the Supreme Court, you have to give, a legitimate driver's license to come into our building. So while they, ascribe to these beliefs, they do sometimes, still participate in, these mainstream contracts.
They'll have a driver's license I'll just say, I mean, a made-up driver's license that they try to use in the course of their day, but when it comes down to brass tacks, then
They've got their,
they also have a real one just for.
So.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is an example and is kind of, sort of why you want to treat, sovereign citizens,
Well,
I don't want to say delicately, but just, like normal people, because sometimes they can be really,
well, you don't want to have to deal with that kind of mess, right?
Addictive.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you help a sovereign citizen if you're in the type of job where it requires you to assist them? So they might deny the government, but as a government, we don't deny them as citizens, right? I mean, we do expect them to pay taxes, and we expect them to follow laws. So in that way, we must help them when they come to us for help, for assistance. So that being said, if they're making requests that are overly burdensome, you do have time and resource restraints if you work in the court system, and at that point you have to kind of say, I'm sorry, I've given you all the resources that I know how to give you, but here's a place where you could go. And I hate to say you're dumping them off on someone else, but you can hopefully dump them off on a website where you can get more information about this thing that you're researching. Or here's some forms, here are valid forms that the court has developed, the standardized forms, that these are the forms that we have, and take a look at these and see if one of these will work for you. Let's see.
And so the challenges of helping them, obviously they're already suspicious of authority, which can come to include court staff, even the people that they're asking for help, which can kind of make things difficult. I've had them, I want this quote, here's this quote. I want other cases that say this quote. And I'll search the quote and I'll say, there's no cases that say this quote. They're like, well, I got it from this case. And I go, okay. So I, do my librarian thing. I go and I look at the original case. Well, they've changed the quote. And that's why the original case isn't coming up. And they're like, you're lying, you're withholding information from me. Like, the moment, maybe I'm not giving them what they think should be there, they're accusing me of being part of this bigger conspiracy. So that's one of the challenges of helping them. And also, there's a communication breakdown. Like I've said, they use a lot of legal sounding words and a lot of terms, but they don't mean the same thing to them as they maybe do to you guys or to us, which can sometimes make communicating with them very, very difficult.
So, cognitive bias. So, we as librarians don't tell them they're wrong, unless maybe it was the guy who was just watching too many YouTube videos and he was just curious.
Wrong.
Yeah,
I just gave him a link that was going to tell him he was wrong,
right,
about what he believed. But I wasn't going to disabuse him on that notion as I talked to him on the phone. I was like, oh yes, I will send you some information about that thing. My information just didn't confirm
right.
the information he had.
Right. So I mean, and that's just it. The information or the assistance that you give a sovereign citizen is not probably what they want to hear, or it doesn't confirm what the track of their research or their legal theory that they've been going down for who knows how long. It's not confirming what they already believe, and so that can lead to some frustration on their part.
People don't like to be wrong.
No,
they don't like to be told that they're wrong. They don't like to be told that their theories are bogus.
So it's important just to recognize that they may be suspicious of the help, assistance, or the material that you give them, but maybe with time they might come around. I don't know. We always explain to them, we give you official information, we give you accurate and reliable, and it's just goes back to that whole information literacy thing. We're giving you authoritative research in response to your request for information, and we don't try to persuade them otherwise. We just
They ask
Try
for
it.
information, we just
With-
send it on back, and sometimes that's all you can do. you
And
know?
sometimes it's, I'm sorry, there's nothing,
Yeah.
I ran your search in both Westlaw and Lexis, and there were no results. And sometimes I'll even do a screen capture of no results so that they can see I ran their exact search and there were no results. But we also have our own biases, right? So we have to recognize when we're dealing with a sovereign citizen that, you know, we might be a little jaded, right?
We might dismiss them offhand. And
Right.
I will say, not too long ago, I was talking to one of them and I had sent them a section from the Constitution, from the Ohio Constitution. And they're like, what you sent me from Westlaw does not match up what is on the LSC website. They're like, there is, you know, it was Article 4, Section 2, subsection A. And I was like, what do you mean that doesn't match up? And so, you know, and I automatically was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, you're wrong, like, you know. So I pull it up in Westlaw, I pull it up on the LSC website. Well, sure enough, there's a difference between the two. And I'm like, oh, like, okay. And they're like, well, I think the one on the LSC is wrong. And like, I immediately thought Westlaw or Lexis was wrong, right? Well, no, like, it turns out, like, I did some background research. I found, and it was wrong on the LSC website, right? Like, and it wasn't anything that was, like, going to change anything, like, legally. It was just, there used to be 3 subsections to subsection A. And there was a House Joint Resolution back in 1995 that took one of them out and moved it somewhere else. And on the LSC website, they had included the new information from the House Joint Resolution, but they just hadn't gotten rid of the one line that the House Joint Resolution had gotten rid of. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, oh, right, like, even if this person who I think is kind of, you know, I automatically assumed they were wrong just based on who they were and the normal things that they asked me. And you know what? It turns out they were right. There was a mistake, and it was the LSC website that had the mistake. And so, not saying that there's many times where, you know, sovereign citizens are going to have, you know, legitimate things, but it's, you know, it's always good not to dismiss people out of hand, and to listen to what they have to say, even if maybe your first instinct is no.
Right. Other issues, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's right.
So, you know, one of the other issues we talked about is that they tend to take up a lot of time and can be really overburdensome with their requests. Just like they like to file a lot of things, they like to ask for lots of things. And especially with us, you know, you answer one question and they immediately send another one, sort of like a whack-a-mole effect. And so one of the ways, you know, we deal with this is every new request goes to the back of the line. Even if it's a follow-up on one of the other ones, you know, we answer questions kind of as they come in, you know, obviously giving priority to the court questions. And so the request goes to the back of the line, as all new requests do. That's a policy that we just have.
But slowing them
But it
down.
does slow them down. It slows them down. You know, if our response time is a little bit slower, it slows down the amount of time or the amount of requests that come in. You know, we also have office policies like the amount, like I'm allowed to scan for you and send you, you know. When we put these policies in place to kind of keep us from being overburdened by requests, you know, not just from these patrons, but from sometimes patrons in general.
And certainly there are, you know, fair use
Yes,
and
and
copyright
there's, yeah, obviously
restrictions on
there's-
us, and we follow those, and that
there's,
just helps us.
You know, exceptions and stuff,
Deal-
right? Like,
deal,
this is keeping
yeah.
me from having, you know, from having to scan prolific amounts of things. You know, and we charge for our copies, which keeps, you know, them coming from it and, you know, copying a whole doc. Well, not always, but from copying lots and lots of things. And so, yeah, so helping people with an involved problem, you know, especially because, you know, we don't want to waste time arguing with them about their legal theories. You know, we don't attempt to direct them what we think they really want. You know, we just we give them exactly what they ask for, even if, you know, oh, you're asking about this thing. Well, maybe this, they give me a citation, I give it to them back, the case back or the resource back. We don't, you know, sort of offer them, it's not the same interaction like if an attorney asks for something, like maybe we would, you know, be like, oh, like, have you looked at this resource too? With these patrons, we kind of just tend to give them what they ask for and not any extra in order to keep them from kind of taking over all of the librarian's time. And so
yeah, policies are important
yes,
too.
policies are very
Yeah.
important. And, you know, and if you are an office or somebody who regularly deals with sovereign citizens, it might be worth putting some policies in place if you find yourself being overburdened by their request or the things that they're asking for.
So what do you say to them? You know, kindness costs nothing, even if the person is really annoying that you're trying to help. You know, I get it, but it costs nothing, and, you know, try to be sympathetic to, you know, if you're dealing with the courts, you're probably not having your best day ever, right? So just approach the person with some sympathy. Don't correct their choice of terms. We just don't want to go down that rabbit hole. And if you can't accept, if you work for the clerk and you can't accept a filing, give them, here's our policy, here's what you have to do. Or, you know, for us, I'm sorry we didn't find anything, but here's this other thing. So don't leave them, try not to leave them empty-handed as if you haven't helped at all, but just say, maybe try this, I don't know. And this is really just for the library, but we, especially when any member of the general public, pro se, sovereign citizen or not, we give a disclaimer when we send material back, just saying, hey, we're not attorneys, not giving legal advice.
Don't want
You know, and you know, we make that a priority.
And again, this answering step by step is sort of more like for use for the everyday patron, but it applies to sovereign citizens too. Listening and repeating back their key terms to make sure I have them down the right way so they're not coming back and accusing me of, you know, withholding information from them or, you know, keeping them from what they think is out there. What your ideal document looks like is sort of something we ask a lot. It doesn't always work well in this case because the ideal document they're looking for normally does not exist. But, you know, I still ask. And then, you know, following up and referring, if like I can't help them, I'll refer them to other places. I try not to do that because I don't, you know, necessarily want to force them off on somebody else. But a lot of times, you know, we're not the right place for them. And if you have filing questions, you know, you need to contact the clerk and that kind of stuff.
And then they do get angry, as we've already discussed. So, and these are just basic de-escalation tactics that you can use with anybody that you're encountering on a day-to-day basis. But you know, body language is important. You don't want your, you know, hands like this or like this. Just try to, you know, this is, you can see just behind your backs or in your pockets. It's more of a, you're taking more of a defensive stance, and I'm not going to attack you. Speaking softly, if their voice is raised, you lower your voice even that much more. You know, try to speak 25% softer than you want them to speak, and that, you know, they have to quiet down to listen to you because you're speaking softly, and they have to shut up so that they can hear what you're saying. Don't interrupt them, just let them vent. Sometimes they do just need to vent. And I liked this quote from this particular resource. It was a presentation, but you may not admire the person or be sad about enforcing the rules. You can, though, respect their humanity and feel sorry that their life is very challenging. So just try to keep that in the back of your mind.
And we've given this presentation before to another group, and I think somebody in one of the clerk's offices was telling me that sometimes they sort of just like gently lean into their delusion too, you know. The whole thing is you just, oh, okay, like, yeah, tell me more about that. Like, and they just kind of, you know, they lean into it and let them get it out because sometimes people just do need to get something out of their system. You know, when I have someone calling and ranting about the conspiracies and they need to report this person and all this kind of stuff, I mean, those aren't necessarily sovereign citizens, it's usually just disgruntled people, but, you know, talking softly and just kind of leaning into like, oh, okay, yeah, tell me more about that. Like, or like, it's the act of listening. And sometimes time constraints does not allow you to do that with everybody, but it does help sometimes dealing with patrons whose legal beliefs are not always in keeping with actual
Reality.
reality.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there,
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that we had a situation with, or a case with a, individual from the Moorish nation.
yes, that is one of the
And,
more cohesive groups.
apparently the Moorish nation formed after they found out that sovereign citizens has a bunch of racist,
Yes.
white supremacist groups. And so the Moorish nation is where, I suppose, free people of African ancestry subscribe to. Anyways, the guy just seemed, he was trying to change his name, that he is not under the U.S. government, and had these documents from the Moorish nation and like with some like Arabic and stuff. Anyways, I was like, oh, it just sounds like you want a name change. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't get that, but it just sounds like you want to change your name.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think there are some forms you need to fill out at probate court. I'm like, I don't know how that works. And he was more, well, I need not only to, I guess, change my name, but to do some other stuff with his rights. And I'm like, I don't know about that. You know, we don't deal with name changes, but if you need to change your identity and recognize this new name other than the birth name that's on your certificate, which is what he was saying, then you have to go to probate court to do that. And seemed amenable. He was like, well, I tried, or I went there, and I'm like, well, you have to specifically say what you're trying to do. You know, you can't just present these documents that are gibberish and expect people to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely, you are working against someone that has some deeply entrenched ideas about their existence.
Yeah, that's what I like. You know, I always like to point people towards the standard forms.
Yeah.
Oh, the form you're looking for, the thing you might be trying to file, you might be able to find that on the standard forms in the Supreme Court of Ohio website. And we are really, most of our reference happens over the phone or over the email, or like over email. And so over the phone especially, like, I'm really able just to take down their terms and just, oh yeah, like I can definitely look into that, or well, actually I always pretend I'm not the librarian, so I'll send that the librarian's way. Yeah, like I'll definitely take that down, I'll have the librarian look into that, like, you know, tell me more about that, what other terms do you want? And it's just kind of, we're lucky that, you know, instead of, because like we don't give answers on the phone, because most of the stuff we're doing involves like a lot of research. We're not allowed to give people answers for things over the phone because
You don't want the
we
whole
don't have
UPL
the
thing,
answers right off the top
and the
of
whole
our head.
UPL thing. Yeah.
So, you know, we're able to take down all of that stuff and kind of lean into it. Oh yeah, like I can tell you more. Let me send you information about that. And even if it's something that's like completely off the wall, then, you know, we can write the email back. Oh, like we couldn't find anything with your terms. Like we're so sorry about that. Here are some standard forms on this website, or if you want to know more about this topic, you know, the Franklin County Law Library has a wonderful source of online guides. And so, you know, the only thing we can do is point people at legitimate sources, and this isn't necessarily what these people want, and that's why it can be really frustrating to deal with them, because you know nothing you send them is, because what you're sending them doesn't, it doesn't confirm what they already believe for the most part. You know, sometimes it does, where they like get a line out of case law or something where they think this is the thing.
Yeah, they cherry pick.
But so they can be frustrating people to deal with, because they, you know, their beliefs aren't our beliefs, you know, especially when you work in the legal system and your attorneys, like, you know, they've got their very own strongly held legal beliefs. They can be frustrating. They can be, you know, like I said, dangerous, in that sometimes, you know, they're vindictive and they can get angry. But when it all comes down to it, helping sovereign citizens is sort of just like helping anybody who's having a bad day and has to be involved in the legal system. It just is a lot of patience, a lot of, well, here are the resources I can send you to, here are the things I can help you with. So.
Any questions or other circumstances that you may have encountered?
Do you have
Sounds
any
like
fun
you've had
sovereign
some
citizen stories?
good ones.
Actually, I have one. There was a gentleman, this has been many years ago, Judge Guy Reese was on the bench at the time, and I think he had been assigned counsel, and he did end up representing himself, because I'm sure that this fellow in assigned counsel were clashing over, the way they handled this case. But he had managed to put together a check, forgery was the charge. He was trying to buy a car, and he put together a check, and it was written on the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and the check, at least at first, cleared. And then it was found out, yeah, but when he testified, he justified it with all these liens and things you all, and the other thing and he attested to this, they're very big on these like deadlines. Well, if I don't hear, I'm gonna do this against you, and if I don't hear within 10 days, I win and you owe me all this money and this kind of thing. And so he was eventually convicted, but I did have this, there is a question here, which is, when he was testifying, because I watched some of it, and the prosecutor, I thought, did a very, very good job handling this guy. He started talking about the Wizard of Oz. Have you all encountered, that was like,
No.
he was drawing, well, that's got a lot of meaning there. It's sort of like like hidden meaning and this kind of thing. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it could be just the man behind the curtain was.
Yeah, right, maybe that's
You're
what
saying
I
that you, the what?
Yeah, I actually, this was like when I was in grade school, somebody told me, one of our teachers said, The Wizard of Oz is actually a parable about William Jennings Bryan's campaign to become president.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But I've never
Okay.
found it anywhere else. It's like, this was a respectable high school teacher, in a not all that good public school system. But nevertheless, I've never seen it anywhere else, but what he said made sense. There's the yellow brick road, and that was the gold standard, and I don't know that much about William Jennings Bryan, but it had something to do with staying on the gold standard or switching to silver, and, and that wasn't really slippers in the book, it was silver slippers. And so it had to do with silver and gold, and the Wizard of Oz was like Bryant, and all the other people were like Bryant, like the Scarecrow was probably farmers, and the Tin Woodman was workers, but I've never seen anything else about it, and I don't know if that's what ties into
That makes a whole lot of sense, and the straw man even,
Yeah, this there you go. Were you gonna say something about that too?
Yeah, so it connects back to the Moorish Nationals. By choice, I'm a staff trainee against all sovereign citizens up in probate court because I find them a breath of fresh air from what we want to deal with. But we get name changes from them, and there started being a crossover with the other fringe religious movement of the Black Hebrew Israelites, who think that white Jewish people aren't actually Jewish, and it's only Native Americans, African Americans, and Hispanics are Jewish. So when we had to disapprove his name change for reasons, he started raising allegations of racial and religious discrimination from the court against him, which, do you have any experience de-escalating that situation? Because we don't want to end up in the dispatch with a Vokes lawsuit. Yeah, it was bad.
I guess it just goes back to this is the policy. If you're not following these rules, we can't, do the name change for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Atlanta showed up in his objections as well, but that's whole. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Atlantis.
Atlantis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the maritime law also entered it.
Well, yes, Atlantis would be maritime law, I believe. That makes lots of sense.
It's in the ocean,
In the ocean. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a journey for us. We also had the guy who said he didn't serve him, he served his corporate identity. So he didn't actually get proper service for the lawsuit.
Yes, that is a big one too. They also like to sign things with their thumbprints. I don't know if anyone ever runs into that.
We had to sign blood.
With with
wow.
red ink or blue ink or blood. Yeah.
Minnie walked into something that she didn't want to walk into.
I am very sympathetic with anybody who has to deal with them and the legal capacity of the court. The library. We get some strange stuff, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, really, in that circumstance, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. It's absolutely, not our intent, but.
Yeah, this isn't in person though, because it's in our actual judicial writing.
Okay. Okay.
So we didn't do the entry of holding after he raised the objection saying you're discriminating against me as a Native American. He wasn't. He just thinks that all black people are Native Americans. Because they've been here since the 16th century before everything else, as they came from Atlantis. Yeah,
Let's bring
no,
that pyramid back up. I think they'd be at the top, maybe.
I know, no, that's, I mean, the honestly, if you, like, the articles in the bibliography are really interesting.
Yeah, the quickest one, the easiest to read is one from University of North Carolina, A Quick Guide to Sovereign Citizens by Crowell.
Yeah.
If you only want to pick one, and bibliography's on the back of your handout, that would be the easiest one.
Yeah,
to-
that one
to
has a
read.
really good list of like keywords and things
Yeah.
that they do. But it is a rabbit hole you can fall down in
Yep.
terms of looking at their beliefs and why they believe the things, and then
Yeah, thank you, thank you so much for coming today.
that's a good one. I'm gonna have to remember that.
Yeah.
Atlantis. Whew.
Okay. There are, if you didn't get a evaluation, there are some up here. If you want to fill one out, great. And Minnie, thank you to the Franklin County Law Library for hosting us. We appreciate it. Sure.
Yeah, no, we.
I remembered the other thing I forgot. So the next class is the sealing, records, and expungement, and then we'll have 3 more classes at the end of the year. And by the next class, we're hoping to have those out, so look for those too.
Great. All right. Thank you.
And
Have a good afternoon. Yeah.
Do you still give out the magic number? I mean, most of it's all done by, remember when we used to do the.
So I just took over, and I have no idea.
No, that's what you had to sign up sheet, the
Yeah.
Supreme Court numbers, right?
Oh, yeah.
She's asking how the credit gets reported to
Oh,
the
it goes-
Supreme
no.
Court. The law library sends it directly with our Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they used to have like an activity number, so in case something goes wrong, which nothing ever has.
Yeah, I have that.
That's what I thought, okay.
Okay. Sorry, I should have done that beforehand.
And if anybody finds themselves needing legal research help, feel free to, you know, obviously you have the Franklin County Law Library. You can also reach out to the library over at the Supreme Court. We are always happy to send in.
We love to help attorneys and judicial
We do.
staff.
Yes.
I have a question about that. So what floor are you on in the Supreme Court?
We are on floor 11 to 15, actually.
Okay. And so, I mean, can, like, if I need to do legal research, because you all are very, very close to,
Yeah.
the court.
Right.
Can I just walk down, or do I have to make? an
Yeah,
appointment?
we are open by appointment, but
Yeah.
if you were to show up in the lobby
Yeah, there's
and
always
without an
gonna be-
appointment,
We
Well-
usually take walk-ins.
Well,
The reason we have
we'll
an
let you.
appointment system is we only have 2 computers,
Yeah.
and it's just our way of making sure we have a computer free before
Right.
somebody comes down and wastes their time. And then what if people are researching?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay, good. Because sometimes there's resources you all have.
Right, right.
This one doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good to know.
yeah. So yeah, you're we've got Westlaw, Alexis.
you can just email us to libref@sc.ohio.gov. Email a research question or request for a document.
Yeah, and if you make an appointment, we're happy. A lot of times, what we end up doing too is like if you need current resources, we'll pull them all down for you, so they're all in one spot. So when you come, everything's right there for you.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Part of our problem is we've got so much on the 5 floors. And the library is arranged in such a strange way that it's hard to